Well, good morning, StoryChurch. Come on in. Let's have some worship. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Amen. I've been thinking a lot lately about value, about what things are worth, probably because my wife and I are searching for a house to buy and seeing prices on things, and thinking about value in terms of what we would be willing to pay for something. That's what value is, and how things get their value. Like this guitar that I bought, the guitar itself didn't determine its value. I did when I bought it, and that's when the value was actualized. And I was thinking about that in relation to ourselves and the value of ourselves. And the world will tell you that you have to determine your own value and be your own voice for yourself, and in part that's true, but what happens when we feel less? What happens when our feelings get in the way? And it's not the feelings are right or wrong, but they can get in the way. And just like the objects in our lives or the things we buy or the things that we hold dear to us, they don't determine their own value. We really don't determine our own value. In the Bible, it's in the book of Romans, chapter 5, one of my favorite books and chapters. It says that while we were still sinners, God gave his son, Jesus, as a sacrifice for us. At our very worst, when we felt the least valuable, somebody paid the ultimate price. And those of you who have kids, I don't have kids, but those of you who have kids, would you give your own child as a payment for anything? Would you give yourselves as a payment for anything? So many of us come here this morning defining ourselves by what we do, what we've done, our position in a company, in a family, how much we make, maybe by a mental state, depressed, diseased, addicted, maybe divorced, doubtful, all these D words. But just know that you are loved by the one who paid the ultimate price. It was on that cross that your value was actualized. So as you sing this next song, is called Who You Say I Am. And it starts out by saying, who am I that the highest king, the most powerful being in the world, would welcome me, would ransom me. And then it goes on to say, I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. And God says, you are loved, you are precious, you are honored, and I've redeemed you. You are mine. Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. At last he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You're for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, who is free indeed. I'm a a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
So good. I feel like the music this morning, especially, has just been speaking to me in some powerful ways. I love the opportunity I get. Every once in a while, I'll meet somebody that I get to talking about our church, and they don't know that I'm the pastor of the church. And I'll be talking about our church, and I'll be like, well, what do you know? Is it any good? Like that kind of thing. And I love to just tell people, well, I go for the music. Like that's why I'm at. Like it's incredible, right? And these guys do an incredible job leading us every week and picking these songs. And I actually took a screenshot. I took a photo of the screen. Is that a screenshot? A photo of that screen of the last song when we were singing these words that said, "And show me who you are, and fill me with your heart, and lead me in your love to those around me." And Kimmy and I had a great privilege last night, along with Neil and Mary Foster, to go as sort of representatives. We were invited to an iftar, which is a meal that sort of ends a fast during Ramadan for the Islamic community. And so we were invited to go here in Durham, and we were able to be a part of that. And at that event, we were able to hand over the funds that you guys gave right after the attacks in New Zealand, in the mosque there. And to be able to hand that over and to be able to just say to them, we love you as followers of Jesus, like we're trying to learn to love our neighbors. And for me to say to them, I'm sorry that it took this for me to get to know you, but we're going to keep building bridges. And to be able to read this morning and sing these words, lead me in your love to those around me. I was just thinking, like, that's what we've done. And I just want to thank you. Thank you for being that church. Thank you for giving generously to people who are very different than you, probably. And yet, the expression of love that was felt very strongly last night. So thank you. I just want to pray for us as we head into our morning this morning. God, thank you for speaking to us in so many ways, not just through your word, God, through a sermon, but through song, through conversation in the lobby, God. Some of us already heard from you before we even made it into the building this morning. So God, thank you. Thank you that you speak. Thank you that you are always speaking, that there's always something us your own. So God, I pray that that voice this morning would be so loud in our hearts and in our minds that any other voices we're hearing telling us anything other than that, God, would be drowned out by your voice this morning. And so God, we thank you, we love you. We pray all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, hey, so glad you're here. Welcome to Story Church. I'm going to invite you to take a few minutes and get to know somebody around you. Say hi and grab some coffee, whatever. We'll be back here in just a couple minutes.
Welcome as always, to StoryChurch. My name is Josh. You probably could have guessed that. You're like, okay, his age, he's either Josh, Justin, or Jason. All right, so we've got Kyle in the band who spent a lot of time preparing. Kyle had really thoughtful remarks. Jeremy, of course, spends lots of time preparing. He's already given very thoughtful remarks. And then you got me in between, so here we go. Anyway, I have a story to tell you about like my first year or so at StoryChurch. First day here, someone stood up here in the same spot and said, we have these connection cards in the seat in front of you. We would like for you to fill it out and introduce yourself to somebody at the welcome table. Didn't do that, headed straight for the door. But between me and that door was Mary Copeland, and that does not fly here. So we did get to meet somebody, and I think we got our welcome gift. I never saw it again, but it's in our house somewhere. We do have a welcome gift if this is your first or second time. Do fill out this card. Don't make Mary chase you. She will. After that, though, a few weeks after our first visit, we had what was then called the Discover Lunch. We call it Chapter 1 now, as part of our First Steps program. What that is a lunch where you can sit down with Jeremy and Kimmy and some of the other staff here and ask whatever you want about the church. Ask easy questions, ask hard questions, and find out more about what StoryChurch is about, some of the history. And we've been coming ever since. That lunch kind of told us what we wanted to know about the church here. Sometime along the way, we volunteered for something like Feed Durham or something like that. That led us to getting plugged in as team members here. To learn more about that, the second part of First Steps is a evening session with some of our team leaders where you can find out ways to get plugged in. So if you worked on Feed Durham this year, that might be a great next step for you to find out what else you can do if you enjoyed that. Following that, eventually we joined connection groups. The one I happen to join is the Man It's Early group, and I will plug that group every chance I get. We've been there for about 3 years. And while we may spend most of the time talking about like early 2000s tooth and nail bands, we also pray together, and we've been praying through lots of things. There's babies in that nursery that we've been praying for since before they existed. We've been through job changes and court proceedings and all that together, and it's a special group. I can't promise that for every single connection group, but it could happen. There are a lot of really special groups that are forming this season. Those start in about a week and a half. So check out storychurch.org/connect for the roster of this summer's connection group. Those are coming up soon. So we now move into, that's the end of my story. Now I'm doing announcements somehow. I don't know how we got from I joined a connection group to announcements, but so we are in week 5 of our Anonymiss series. This has been, with no hyperbole, one of my favorite series we've ever done. Because each week we get these little stories that are kind of snippets of the entire Bible. And this week will be more of the same. We've got truth and grace and redemption. So now Jeremy's going to teach us the whole Bible in like 35 minutes.
That's the goal, right? All right. Well, thank you, Josh. Awesome. Thank you for being here, guys. Excited to do this. This is the 5th and final week of Anonymiss, and I appreciate I've gotten a lot of feedback. People seem to have really loved this series. It's been a lot of fun for us. What we've been trying to do over these several weeks is just highlight some of these women that go without being named, and yet their stories are so powerful, and these women are so incredible. And so we've been learning from them, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm excited to keep going in that. But first, real quick, I wanted to plug something else, if I could. Today's June 2nd, right? 10 days from today, Kimmy and I celebrate 20 years of marriage. So hard to believe. Yeah. So we're super excited about that. And later this month, we have like an epic trip planned, the kind of thing we've been planning for years. We've been talking about. Can't wait for that. But here's the thing. Next Sunday will be right before our anniversary, and just with timing of it and everything, we just thought it would be kind of fun to just spend a day, Kimmy and I, just sort of team teaching and sharing about some things that we've learned in terms of relationships, marriage, the whole thing. And so next Sunday, that's what we're going to be doing. But here's the thing. I wanted to give you a chance, if you had questions or if you were just like, hey, would you tell about this? I want to give you an opportunity to do that. And so we've set up, we have a church number. This is not anyone specifically's phone number. It's just a church phone number. If you have questions or things you would love to hear us talk about, would you text your questions or comments or whatever to this number, 919, I'm going to say it for podcast and online people, 919-551-3885. So jot that down or put it in your phone right now, 919-551-3885. 3885. And if you have any question, anytime throughout this week, you can just text that over to that, and we'll eventually get all those and compile them and see if we can address those things together. But super excited. I hope you'll be here next week for that. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, so on to Anonymiss. So far, in case you haven't been with us, I wanted to catch you up where we've been. We talked in week 1 about this woman who pushed her way through a crowd. Despite the fact that she shouldn't have been there, she shouldn't have been doing these things, her boldness, her courage, her belief that if I could just touch Jesus, I'll be healed. And that kind of faith Jesus rewards by healing her and just saying, like, your faith is incredible, right? And we learned about this faith, and we just said, we ought to model that kind of faith ought to be true of us. Then we talked about this woman who pleaded with Jesus on behalf of her daughter for healing. And despite the fact that she was kind of from the wrong family and the wrong people and the wrong whatever, she sort of argues with Jesus about that to the point where it seems like from that moment on, Jesus' entire ministry pivots. And all of a sudden, the kingdom opens up wider to a whole different group of people. And it's this woman that we can go, man, she was the catalyst that began to kick that door open. And then we talked about the woman who gave very little monetarily, but yet she gave everything she had. We're told that she gave her whole life when she gave those 2 little copper coins. And Jesus points to her and says, that's what it looks like to be completely sold out for me. Don't get distracted by the big amounts that other people are throwing in. Understand this person gave her whole life. And then last week we talked about the woman who anointed Jesus, who saw a king in their midst before anyone else saw it. And her insight and her courage and her faith in that moment was something that we can pick up on and go, wow, this is an incredible thing for us to model our lives after. So this morning, all of those were in the book of Mark. And this morning, we're actually going to switch over to the book of John. We're going to hit one that I just felt like, you know what, how do we talk about women who go nameless in the Bible and all these incredible stories without talking about this woman? So we're going to go there this morning, and it's in John chapter 4. If you've ever heard the story of the woman at the well, that's what we're going to talk about this morning. It's a powerful story and a powerful interaction that she has with Jesus. Again, it's in John chapter 4. Now, the story's kind of long. We're going to read a lot of it, but we're not going to read all of it. We're going to kind of hit and miss a little bit. So if you want to go back and read all the details, you can go to John chapter 4 and read it. But John chapter 4 this morning, everything will be on the screen for you. John 4, beginning in verse 4, here's how the story goes. Now he, that's Jesus, had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Okay, so we're going to stop there in the story for a second. I always like at the beginning of this to go, what do we know so far? What do we know about this person? Well, she's a Samaritan, right? She's a Samaritan. Now, Samaritans were a group of people that were at odds with the Jewish people. There was this conflict, and you can read history about this, but they did not like each other. They saw each other. They had theological differences. They had differences when it came to how they viewed, God and places of worship and all this. In fact, we're going to see a little bit of that in a second. But they were at odds with each other. And they did not like each other to the point where many people have said that as Jews would travel, and if they had to go to the other side of Samaria, they would usually not go through Samaria. They would usually extend their travel a long time to go around this place. They didn't even want to be near these people. They didn't want to go near them at all. And so Jesus, I love Jesus, had to go through Samaria, right? Like, no, you didn't really have to go through Samaria, but Jesus had to go through Samaria. And so he goes through Samaria and he camps out at this well right here at the beginning. And we get this interaction. I love how it starts because a couple clues we get. Number one, it says it's noon. Now, noon is not normally the time that you go to the well because it's hot, right? Like that just, like I don't mow my lawn in the middle of the day. Hopefully you don't either. Like you do it in the morning or you do it in the evening, right? You avoid the hot parts of the day. And this is hard work. Carrying a big thing of water from a well back to where you live. This was the kind of thing that was normally done first thing in the morning, right? And we'll get to why that might be that she's here at noon in a second, but that's one clue that we get. And then I just want you to see, as we start, that when Jesus speaks to her, she's caught off guard, right? She is not expecting Jesus to interact with her at all. Probably as she's walking up to the well, she's thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't expect anyone to be here, right? And here's this guy, and well, at least I won't, like, he's not going to say anything to me. But when he asks her for a drink, she's like, wait a minute. You know, you almost get, like, sense a little bit of like attitude, a little something like, hey, you're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan. Like, what are you talking to me for, right? Like, we don't interact. I'm not sure what you're doing right now, but stop it, right? Like this sense of like, you should not be talking to me. But then the story goes on in verse 10. And Jesus answered her and he said, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. And again, I think you should read this with a little bit of attitude, right? Like a little bit of cynicism, a little bit of sarcasm, like, what do you think you're going to do here, right? You have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? And then she asks, are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did all his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. So again, I see our anonymous woman this morning with a little bit of an edge to her, right? I see her pushing back a little bit, like you know, looking around like, I don't see you having anything to pull water out of the ground. Like, who do you think you are? She even kind of asks him, who do you think you are? You think you're better than our father Jacob, right? Like, do you think you're more important than him? Like, you gonna be able to do something that even he couldn't do? And she kind of pushes back on him. But Jesus begins to offer something here. He begins to speak to her and say, no, listen, there's some things you don't understand. There's some things you don't know about this situation, right? In fact, if you knew what I had to offer, and if you knew who I was, it wouldn't be me asking you. You would be asking me, right? You would be asking me to give you what I have. And he begins to tell her, he says, I have living water. I have a kind of water that when you drink, you will never thirst again. In fact, I have a kind of water that isn't just going to quench your thirst forever, but it's going to become a well in you that actually springs out, that other people around you will experience as well. That people will be able to come to you and be able to experience this. And Jesus says, I could give you something that would be so much greater than what you're coming here for. Right, that you're coming here to get this and you're coming here to experience this, but I got something that will quench your thirst way more than this, right? I got something that will meet a much deeper need for you than what you're coming here for. And it's like with that kind of conversation, I notice in the story, her tone starts to shift. She starts to go, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? And so in verse 15, it goes like this. It's the woman says to him, sir, give me this water, so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And he told her, go, call your husband and come back. Now you're reading this going, wait, that seems like a weird comment, right? It is a little bit weird. Let's keep going. And she says, I have no husband, she replied. And Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you're a prophet, right? Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. What is she doing? Smoke screen, right? She's throwing the smoke and running. She's like, we're moving on to a different subject, right? Like, I don't want to talk about that. And she is doing everything she can to distract and deflect and to push this conversation somewhere else, because she's like, whoa, I can see that you're a prophet, right? Like you know some things. You know some things about me, and I'm not sure how, and that's a little freaky. So let's go into a theological debate. Let's shift gears. Because if I could stay up here in my head and just debate you on this level, then I don't have to get into my life. I don't have to get into my junk. I don't have to deal with this stuff, right? I would rather do that. And so here's the thing. When you start hearing this about this woman, it's like all of a sudden, it's like the movie, you meet the person, and then all of a sudden as the movie progresses, you start to see more about who they are, right? Like that's what we're experiencing here. We met this woman, all we know is she came to the well. She's there at an odd time, but that's interesting, but here she is, and all of a sudden now the layers are starting to get peeled away, and we're starting to see, here's a woman with a past. Here's a woman with a story, right? And we start to see a clue. Why is she at the well at noon alone instead of in the morning when all the other women come? Well, I would guess, as you might, it's not comfortable to be the woman who's had 5 husbands and now has another man when you're hanging out with all the other ladies, right? That there is something going on in that moment. There's some sense of shame. There's some sense of probably the other women look sideways at her. They probably whisper when she's around. They probably don't trust her anywhere near them or their families, right? There is this sense of like, I don't want her around, you know? She's been uninvited to so many parties probably that she's just figuring, you know what, I'll just go at noon. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with the noise. I don't want to deal with the whispers and the looks. And, you know, I don't want to hear from Martha again. I don't want to do all that, right? Like, she's just thinking, I'm going on my own, and I'm going at noon. And she goes to just get her water and go home, and she never expected that she would run into someone like Jesus. She never expected that this man would say, hey, by the way, how's your husband doing, right? By the way, how's that whole thing working out for you? And so here's a woman with a reputation. And I would suggest that I think shame is a primary feeling that she feels. That as she goes to this well day after day, she does so to avoid the shame. She does so to avoid the looks, to avoid the conversations, to avoid all that. And so when Jesus begins to talk to her about living water, he's beginning to tap into something much deeper than just, why are you, like, here's some water to drink, right? Jesus is sort of launching this metaphor. And he's beginning to talk to her, and he's beginning to say and address this woman who keeps going back to this well to quench a thirst that she can't seem to quench, right? And Jesus is like, hey, you know what else is like that, right? And he's beginning to talk to this woman about this is indicative of who she is, that she continues to go to a well that is not satisfying. She continues to go to a place to try and gain some sense of meaning or significance or whatever it is, and it continually leaves her empty. And I don't know about you, but man, I resonate with that, right? I can think about things in my life that from time to time continually pop up, or seasons in my life where I continued to do the same thing over and over, and like it never satisfied, right? It never fulfilled. It never delivered on what it promised. And yet I kept going back to that well. I kept going back to that thing, believing, well, next time, right? And it just doesn't work. And I think for many of us, we keep going back to that same well. And just think about it. Like, what is the well for you? What is the thing that you might keep going back to that promises to quench your thirst, that promises to provide something for you, and yet it leaves you empty. It leaves you feeling thirsty again. I think for some of us, it's our addiction to our phones and things like that we keep going back to the note, like, oh, a bing, a notification. We go to it, and maybe this will mean I'm important or significant because I got this email, or I got this text, or somebody liked my image, and we run to that, and yet, man, that well goes dry fast, doesn't it? And we just keep going back to it. We keep going to that thing, thinking that somehow, well, if I get enough likes, if I get enough followers, if I get enough whatever, then it's going to satisfy, and it doesn't. Or maybe, it's something else. Maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's pills. Maybe it's, relationships. Maybe it's sex or porn or any of these kinds of things that we keep running to, believing that somehow in there must be life, there must be something. Maybe it's a title recognition or success or some level of achievement. If I can just keep running to this thing and keep achieving and keep going, that eventually my thirst, my need for significance will be met. And yet, like, you get to where you think that is, and then you realize, wait, there's still another rung up. Oh, I should reach for that one, because maybe that's where it is, because this one doesn't seem to be providing it. And we keep going and we keep going and we keep reaching. And Jesus looks at her and says, how long are you going to keep going to that well? How long are you going to keep reaching for that thing? How long are you going to keep doing that? I have living water for you. I have something for you that will quench a thirst that you have that you don't even know exists, right? He's giving her an opportunity to heal her shame. He's giving her an opportunity to put the pieces back together. And I think that's what Jesus offers us this morning. That's what he offers all of us. But isn't it funny? I mean, I think that she acts like a lot of us would act. She's sort of caught off guard by that, right? Like, it's never was in her mind that she's going to have a conversation about her husbands when she went to the well, right? And yet here she is. And so she just sort of deflects and she distracts and she just thinks like really fast on her feet. And she's like, I'll go into a theological debate. And I don't know, I mean, I've been there, right? When someone asks me, how you doing, you know? Like, I don't want to go, well, let me tell you about my, let me tell you about the history. Let me tell you. No, it's like, I'm good, you know? Like, we sort of talk about, how about the game? Did you see the whatever? And we kind of jump to things. We want to distract. We want to go over here, because if I start to talk about what's really going on, man, that's going to be a long, awkward conversation, you know? I'm not sure I want to go there. And so we kind of stay in these other conversations. We stay in these other places. And when Jesus starts to press in on this issue, she starts to go to someplace else. I think we do this all the time in a very similar way that this woman did. I don't know about you, but I have often had conversations with people who have hang-ups about God or faith or religion or whatever. And generally speaking, if I start talking about that with somebody and I want to talk about, like, hey, tell me about, whatever's going on, it's like, a lot of times we jump right into these theological debates. It's like, well, how can you believe in a God that does X? And, or how can you believe a God that's all loving when there's suffering in the world, right? And it's a legitimate question. It's something that is worth a conversation. But what we never want to deal with is the suffering that I cause other people, right? We never want to press in on the fact that I actually have caused suffering to people. We want to stay intellectual. We want to stay up here. We want to deal with it in this place. But it's like, no, listen, like, we're all part of that, right? We're all part of that situation. And how about we talk about our own things? How about we talk about what's going on in our heart? And here's the truth about Jesus that I have found, that sooner or later, Jesus confronts the ugly in all of us, right? That Jesus points something out, that Jesus starts to press in, he starts to ask questions, he starts to poke around, he starts to do things that you and I would rather stay away from. But the longer we walk with Jesus, the more he says, hey, could we talk about that? Could we do some work on healing that part of your heart? Hey, how about that thing over here? Remember that thing in your past you got so bitter about and you got so angry about? Why don't we figure out where that's coming from? Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we heal that thing? And most of the time we don't want to, so we'll glaze past it. We'll move on. We'll say, whoa, okay, God, how about we pray? I'll pray for world peace. And we just kind of move on to something else. And it's like, God wants world peace, great, but God also wants to heal each and every one of our hearts. He wants to work through the things that are going on in our lives right now. And it's so easy to jump beyond that. So easy to point, well, what about their need over there? Let's talk about their need. True, but let's talk about ours as well. Let's figure out what's going on here. And so here's the thing. This story keeps going. The woman, she has some more debate with him, which we don't have time to read this morning. But then she says this. The woman says, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. And when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. This kind of like, she thinks this is going to end the discussion. Well, we'll agree to disagree. But when Messiah comes, then he'll tell us where we all stand on this, right? Well, that's the wrong person to say that to. Because then Jesus says, I, the one speaking to you, that's me, right? I am that person. I am the Messiah. I am he. Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking with her? Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? And they came out of the town and they made their way toward him. Now, There's a couple of details in here I don't want you to miss, right? Remember, the woman comes to the well at noon. She comes with a jar. She comes carrying this thing, hoping I'm going to fill this jar with water that's going to sustain me and it's going to carry me on. Now, metaphorically also, right, she's been doing this in her life. She's been coming to this place. She keeps going to the same well, hoping that that is going to sustain her. And then did you notice the detail John says? That leaving her water jar, she goes running back into the town, right? That she came to find something that wasn't going to sustain her, and in the end, she leaves it because now what? She's had an interaction with Jesus. She's experienced the living water, and she goes running back into the town. The woman who was once filled with shame about who she was and her past goes running into the town yelling about it, right? She goes back into the town going, hey guys, out at the well, there's a guy who will tell you everything I've ever done, right? And they're like, that sounds like a good story, right? And they all go running out there. This woman with a past, this woman with so many things in her life that she's ashamed of, things that she's avoided other people, now she goes running into the town to grab everyone that she can to begin to tell them, I just met someone who changed everything. I just met someone who looked at the broken stuff in me and I didn't feel shame about it. I just met someone who told me things about myself that I had never told anybody, and yet he still seemed to offer me himself. He offered love. He offered his grace to me. And so her shame became her story. It became something that she was ready to share with anyone who would listen. It's a transformative story. It's a transformative moment. She goes to the well at noon to avoid the stares and avoid the whispers and avoid the people, and yet she ends up running into town to find everyone that she can, to tell them about what has happened. That's what interacting with Jesus does. And so she becomes, frankly, like a missionary. She becomes someone in this city that transforms this city. People come running out to see Jesus, and then we get this detail next. It says, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we've heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. It's essentially, they're saying, we heard your story, and it was amazing, and it was enough to convince us, but now we've got a story of our own. Now we have interacted with him as well. Now we have begun to get to know him and understand him, and now he has expressed that same sort of love and grace, and he's begun to give us that living water as well. This woman, what I love about her is her willingness to confront the ugly. Her willingness to say, you know what? My mistakes, my pain, my shame, all of it is used by God to let other people know about what he's done for me. And she begins to take those places that she had tried to hide and cover up, and it becomes a platform. It becomes a thing that she starts to tell others about as much as she can. Think about the courage of this woman. Think about her standing up going, man, I've been broken. Right? Now, we don't know why she's had 5 husbands. Maybe she was rejected 5 times. Maybe she was unfaithful 5 times. Maybe she's experienced death after death after death. I don't know. I'm not sure why she's in this position, but you can bet there's stuff there. There's stuff that she started to believe about herself. There's stuff that she started to believe about who she was and her worth and her value and all of these things. And yet she goes running into town now and goes, guys, it's all different. I met someone, right? And they're like, oh, here we go again. She's like, no. I met someone, and he changed me. It's living water, right? I had a thirst, and it's been quenched forever. There's something I've been chasing. There's this thing that I hoped I would find, and I found it. I found it, and I'm not thirsty anymore. So she goes running to tell her story. I want to ask you this morning, is there any way that this anonymous woman is like us? Do you find yourself in the story this morning? And maybe that you see yourself in her today, and maybe you see her, that you recognize that sense of hiding, that sense of shame, that sense of avoiding people that you don't want to see. Maybe you've recognized, man, I'm going to a well. I've been going to this well, and it's just not been working. But instead of going to the well, you've just avoided the people that made you realize that you're going to the well. And so now you've just sort of isolated yourself. You keep going to the well, but now you're also by yourself. You're not in community. You don't have people around you. I think it's real easy to even experience in our modern times. I think it's easy to experience church completely online. I love our online viewers. I love people who are listening to podcasts, but I have to wonder, is there a sense in which you're going to the well at noon to avoid people, to avoid community, to avoid authenticity and vulnerability? It's hard. It's hard. But it's like when we begin to get vulnerable with one another, here's what I know about this woman. Her vulnerability not only set her free, it set an entire town free, right? Because she wasn't the only one with a past. She wasn't the only one with secrets. She wasn't the only one pretending. I mean, everybody in that town, because they're human, just like us, right? They're all doing this. And when she goes and she says, hey, guys, the worst about me is on display right now, right? And guess what? It doesn't even matter because this person has given me love and grace and they've given me living water. It not only set her free, but the entire town went and they got set free too. So I just want to encourage you this morning, you've got a story. You've got something that you have avoided. There's something that you didn't want to talk about. There's some brokenness in your past. There's something that you would rather forget. And I just want to suggest to you that maybe that's the very thing that God wants to use to set someone else free. Would you have the courage, like this woman, to begin to speak about it, to begin to share it with somebody else, to begin to say, I have blown it, I have messed up, or I have been through some stuff, or I've experienced unbelievable sorrow and grief, or I've experienced pain, I have failed, whatever it is, that you could begin to share that with somebody else. And I'm not saying you have to get up on a platform and do it, but is there someone in your office, is there someone in your family, is there someone in your neighborhood that you can go, you know what, can I just share with you something, right? Because there's almost nothing more powerful than saying, me too, right? I've been there. I get it. I understand. She does that. So I want to invite you this morning. I want to invite you to stop going to a well, first of all, that doesn't satisfy. I'm going to invite you to leave your water jar. To realize that that thing that you're carrying around, that you're hoping, if I could just fill this full enough, that somehow it'll satisfy me. It won't. Okay, it won't. Leave the water jar. Go pursue the living water. Realize that there's someone who loves you and will fill you and fulfill you more than anything that you could ever chase down on your own. May you have the courage this morning, the courage of this anonymous Samaritan woman, to leave your water jar, to stop going to the same well that leaves you empty, to stop isolating yourself from those around you, to experience the living water. I'm going to pray for you. I'm just going to encourage you to join me in this. God, we come to you this morning understanding that, God, this story, it scares some of us. If we were confronted all of a sudden with our deepest secrets, of the things that we were trying to avoid, God, many of us would change the subject as well. But God, I pray that you will give us the courage like this woman had to not only face that stuff, but then to take that and begin to use that, Lord, as a way to set other people free as well. God, would you remind us of your goodness to us? Would you remind us of your grace, Lord? Jesus, you didn't bring that story up to shame her. You brought that story up, God, because it was an open wound in her heart. And you wanted to heal it. And so, God, may we have the courage to face those broken parts, face those things that we're afraid to face. God, would you use it in our lives and our families, God? Would you use it for the sake of our children? Would you use it for the sake of our city? We pray all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Well, this morning, if anything that we've brought up this morning would be something that you would like to pray through or talk about, I just want to encourage you. We would love to do that with you. You can meet some of us up front here. We'd love to pray with you and talk with you. Also, just want to encourage you again, if you're new, please do take that blue card and fill it out for us this morning. Say hi to the folks out in the lobby. Kimmy and I would also love to meet you. If you'd like to talk, we'll be out there. And then finally, if you're giving today, again, like I mentioned earlier, you guys have been such a blessing giving financially to our church, and it's really enables us to do things like what we were able to do this week, where we were able to just bless this community and express the love of God to people. And so thank you for your participation in that. If you would like to give, you can do that online through our website. You can give by texting 84321. And also, of course, the envelopes in your chair. There's a box in the back of the room if you want to use that. And other than that, guys, next Sunday, like I said, we're going to be back here. Kimmy and I are going to share a little bit about relationships. Looking forward to that. Should be a good time. Invite some people to join you. We'd love to see you back here next week at 9:30 or 11:15. Guys, have a great week. See you then.